football. So if you guys want to jump in with your takes today, just kidding. We were talking about college football, but our intent today is to kind of run through three different topics. So the first of those just being our schools reopening and really what it looks like to love our schools well in this next season. And then after that, we want to talk a little bit about the church reopening, specifically the park, but also just in general, things that we're thinking about, the things that we're considering as we kind of move into the fall. And then finally, we want to close with a conversation about ministry of encouragement, which is something that we've been referencing and talking about, and we'll continue to talk about in our worship services over the next couple of weeks. And so we wanted to just frame up a little bit more about what we mean when we say ministry of encouragement. So I guess the first thing to do is just I really thought this past week, Cameron Vickery and Terry Pease and Nancy and Jen and several others came together to build these back to school packs for the kids at we were specifically focused on Oak Meadow Elementary School, where our Oak Meadow parish had been meeting. But it was a pack with headphones and cool school supplies and things like that. So and it really got me thinking about what are we going to do in this coming season to love on our schools really well. The park has had a 10-year partnership with schools. We've almost always, except for the first year, met in a school or maybe in multiple schools. And we've always been able to serve and love them well. We're in a weird season right now where the schools are not open to us, which is understandable. But we still want to be engaged in loving them well this coming fall. So yeah, just some initial thoughts, and we can kind of build off of that. But what comes to mind when we talk about something like that?
Yeah, I think I would just say that. I think being the son of a 30+ year third grade teacher, pandemic or not, it's like, I think our schools are really kind of a hub for just local activity. So many families are connected in with our public schools or charter schools, things like that. And so I think for me in my neighborhood, one of the things I'm starting to do is just getting really involved with the Parent Teacher Association and really kind of trying to get creative around how we can support and love the teachers and the staff of Oak Grove. And so some of the things that we're talking about doing are, not too new or super creative ideas, but just having a plan for each room, each class, and having kind of a monthly rhythm of loving that teacher, supporting that teacher. Could be as simple as, providing some kind of gift card, dinner out, something like that, just to support them. Like I said, growing up in a home with a teacher, just kind of knew and always experienced how teachers just pour so much into so many kids. And so, that's one thing that we're looking at doing. I think just knowing who the principal of your school is and praying for them is a great thing to be doing. Especially right now. We'll probably talk about this later, but just the immense amount of stress and anxiety and planning that's going into this school year is huge. So I love that we're talking about this. I love that school pack idea. I think that could be something that could scale out to some other schools. But I think just getting creative and being prayerful. For us, it's our first year in public school with Everett being a first grader. So just knowing the principal's name, you're really getting to know his teacher well, and finding out how we can just best support them and making a plan, versus kind of just assuming something will happen. So be a couple thoughts I'd throw out there.
Chris is trying not to drop the fact that he is the president of the PTA of his school. So I appreciate you not trying to use coercive power in this conversation.
Yeah.
And come in over us with your smart things that because of the position you held. So
isn't that what they make a first year parent do? It's like initiation, right? Something like
that. Totally. Yeah. And I'm finding out more and more how deep the rabbit hole is, but I'm excited about it. But I think I did mention it last week. So I think I used some coercive power last week. I'm trying to be a little more less upfront this week. But yeah.
Well, so my family's in full swing. We are early start, so we started school yesterday, distance learning, which will be the first 3 weeks. And man, it has just been a whirlwind already. I was just talking with Sarah Woolsey downstairs at Impact Guild, where I'm at filming this, and we were talking about how equipped my family is. I have, of course, I'm a technology guy. I have a ton of computers available to me, iPads. All of us on this call right here, we've been doing seminary on Zoom for 4 years, so we're like Zoom pros. We've been using it. We know how to use the technology. We've done a lot of class work online. So, and then my wife, before 3 years ago, we had been homeschooling for 4 years, 5 years. I don't remember how many, a long time. And she was a teacher. So we were like extremely equipped for this distance learning kind of thing. And it's been really, really hard for us already. We've had tears, 2 out of 3 children crying. I won't say which ones, but and it's been tough. It's been hard getting everything and getting into rhythms. And we felt really organized. And that just makes me wonder how many other families, how they're dealing with it. Maybe people are doing fine, but I just imagine how hard it is for other families. So there is something to praying for families in kids in your kids class. And maybe if you don't have kids, there's something to finding ways to support families. This is why, spoiler alert, this coming Sunday, we're praying in our prayers of the people for parents, teachers, and for students. And we've got a bunch of parents, teachers, and students that are doing those prayers for us. And we do this every year at the park because we always think it's important to do this, and we're very connected to education communities. But I feel like this year, even more than any other time, this prayer for all 3, parents, teachers, and students, is just an important step. I personally did, we're at a charter school at Great Hearts. And so in the middle of all of our town halls and crazy videos we've been doing, I sent a personal message to our principal, Mr. Dowdy, just saying, I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not going to tell you do anything wrong. I just want to tell you, I'm praying for you. I'm going to be praying for you by name every day. So I think some of that's we'll talk later, this ministry of encouragement, but that, man, and in this season, if you know a teacher, if you know a family, if you know an administrator, like don't withhold that encouragement from them. Like maybe put it on your calendar and do it every week. Do it as often as you think of it. Pray for them, yes, and then send them encouragement at the same time.
Yeah, that was something I was going to say, of just having a posture of grace during this season. This is our first year doing real school. Holland and Kai are doing kinder and pre-K at an SAISD school. And, I think one of the things for us as we were meeting their teachers via Zoom was I was just overwhelmed with grace. I mean, they're obviously stressed out and learning new platforms that aren't even ready yet, and just all sorts of things that are kind of up in the air. And so one of our concerns was, both of us work full time, and then trying to do homeschool and all of that kind of stuff. It's all new and certainly can be overwhelming. And Holland's teacher, she was saying that she's obviously teaching and then has several kids at home that she's also responsible for teaching. So she's like, yeah, we'll just see how it goes. And I think just kind of having that, I don't want to say low expectations of our schools, but appropriate ones, where it's, at the end of the day, it's reminding me a lot of us just leading a church through this, of we are working hard. We are doing everything we can possible to make this work and to pour into people that we are responsible for shepherding. And I think just assuming that about our school administrators and teachers, because I'm sure things are going to be frustrating and not work right, and everyone's stress level is super high. So to me, I think that's one of the best ways we can serve, is just to have that attitude of grace, as well as encouragement. And, I think practically, one of the cool things that Megan Kirchner, our family ministries person and my sister-in-law did was she emailed all of our family ministry volunteers from Midtown asking for people to write notes to our kindergarten kids as they're starting school for the first time. So I think just I think we can get overwhelmed when we try to think big scale, which I think we should do that if you have the bandwidth. But I also think just the little things of just encouraging and writing notes are huge. So.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Yeah.
I think we have to call him president from here on out. I don't know if we're on
president. Welcome back, Mr. President.
Yes.
I did not know what happened. Sorry, guys.
One of the things I've learned over the last several years through our involvement with Snack Pack for Kids and just through the advocacy work of several folks in our church with regards to schools is that the public schools serve so much more than education. And I think that's been one of the most interesting things for me early on in this deal. We had an opportunity, my older son and I think actually I took both boys, but we had an opportunity to go over to Larkspur Elementary School and hand out the snack packs along with breakfast and lunch. And we live in not an affluent part of the city, but it's a nicer part of the city. And I was just shocked the 175 families every day that were lined up in their cars to get lunch and breakfast. And there's just this one school. And so, you kind of, you miss the other programming, like social work, like counseling, like food, you miss a lot of those things. And especially if you're a person who hasn't, needed those things or taken advantage of those programs, they kind of seem like you may not even know they're there. But when the public school systems are not open, it's a major, major hit to our city. And so I think and so for me, it's always been low hanging fruit for me for the church to be loving on our schools. It just seems like one of the easiest ways to support something local in your neighborhood, in your context, and to realize the breadth of programming that they actually provide. And so, so any closing thoughts on the schools, and then we can move over and talk a little bit about churches opening.
I think that's a great point, Scott, of, really church and school doing way more than just teaching people. And just thinking about, some of the schools that we've served as a church down in our area, and just, it's not just the kid that attends the school that's affected, it's the whole family. I mean, with Snack Pack in particular, they look at how many siblings they have at home who are not also receiving food and distribute that as well. And so it really, and just getting to know some of those families that receive those services, it's just, yeah, you're right. From kind of like a more privileged status of not needing those things, it's amazing, kind of the weight that we're all feeling of the schools not being open and trying to handle that. And also just being sensitive to those who, maybe are single parents or working multiple jobs. And I mean, it's just, I think that's a huge responsibility of the church, not just a nice thing to do, but really that when we talk about parishes and spiritual responsibility for our neighborhoods, that serving the families who are now also affected by a pandemic, economic crisis, and schools not being open. I mean, it's a big thing that we as believers of Christ should be pursuing and active in.
Yeah, great thought. Well, let's close on that and then kind of move over here and talk about church reopening. So, this is just a really difficult subject that we've struggled with a lot. I think that, collectively, if you're tuning in on this video, you're looking at maybe 200 years of church attendance amongst the four of us or something like that. So, we, I didn't come to church till I was 18, but then I made up for it in, 25 years of 7 services a week kind of thing. And so, this has been a really, really difficult season, and a frustrating season for us. And while there's been a lot of new rhythms and a lot of incredibly hard work done, but it's just been really frustrating. So our desire is to be, back. And honestly, our desire is to really be fully back into our parishes or whatever that's going to look like going forward. But we know we have to take baby steps. And so we don't have a date to announce or anything like that today, but I thought it would be good to maybe let people in a little bit on the conversations that we've been having, what our concerns are and what our, kind of where our heart's at. And so, I think it's probably doesn't need to be said that safety is obviously one of our major concerns. And we do have a location secured, and we're trying to figure out the way to do socially distanced kind of worship. We were going to do that in right in the beginning of July or June. Was it June? I can't remember.
July, right before the
July 12th, right? And then, everybody got that terrifying warning beacon on their phone that went off of like, this is a hot zone. Don't leave your house. Bubble wrap your children. And so we felt like it was culturally insensitive and just not smart to do that. And so since then, we've learned that really what we want to do is to lean into our leadership community and to listen well to their heart and their desires. So our kind of next steps are around calling our leadership community together, listening well, surveying our larger congregation, and then really letting a plan form from that. And so we have some specifically challenging issues because we are in multiple rooms over multiple neighborhoods, and we rent all those rooms. And so, which has been our strategy for the last decade, but it's proving to create a little bit of extra challenge in this season. So, so I'll just open it up. But what are some general thoughts, or we can talk heart, we can talk pandemic, epidemiology, whatever. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, being married to a medical professional, it's helpful and also not helpful at certain times. I think just having Mayor's wisdom of like, pouring into what we're doing is huge. But I also think, looking at, I guess a concern I have is if we aren't able to like provide childcare, then I know all of our parishes are affected, but Midtown has like 200 adults, 7,000 kids. And so, just the practicality of, meeting in person, having kids, I think is a big challenge for a lot of people. And then I also think, I think where discernment comes in is how are we wise about what's going on? And, in many ways, kind of taking cues from schools as well and seeing how that goes. But I also think there's something to like pandemonium and fear that isn't healthy in making decisions, which I'm not saying we are doing that at all. But I do think that that's a big thing for people right now, is just this fear-based approach and really just trying to be wise about how to navigate that. And there's, as a leader, there's, both ends of the spectrum's perspectives, and how do you honor both of those and serve both of those? So I think those are big things for me, of just practically thinking, what is safe, and then how do we also serve families in that larger group setting? I think the big thing for me is, which I know many of our groups are doing this, but just meeting in smaller groups with their missional communities, fellowship corps, and I think most people are getting more comfortable with doing it that way, which I think is really powerful, and a really early church, meeting in homes, having worship together that way. So that's been a real positive, I think, in this restructured time.
And Mike, I'm so glad you brought that up about fear, because I think it's really, as you said that, my initial reaction when you said that was, when you talked about fear, was to say, yeah, and pastors are really scared of not opening. Like, that's a whole other fear of, like, the church is like, at the simplest form of what we do, we are inviting people into rhythms of discipline and rhythms of, absolution and confession and communion. And the rhythms are really important. And so, and I don't think in general online church has stoked the rhythms that we think are important. So there's a lot of, like, sermon hopping, and a lot of, like, of complaining, and a lot of, like, I'm just not going to do this. Call me when you guys get back. And I don't fault anybody for sermon hopping. I mean, Matt Chandler's a great preacher. I mean, but I, I get that. But when we shift to such a hard consumer place of consuming these things, it gets out of the spiritual rhythms that we would argue are necessary for discipleship and sanctification. So I think, like, that's the balance, where it's like there's a fear on both sides, because it's like, I don't want to be the pastor that gets up there and brazenly says, everybody hug each other, disease isn't a thing, and then have this outbreak in our community. And I would never do that, by the way. But like, on the other hand, saying, like, and we'll catch you in 2021 is also challenging. I know Andy Stanley did that, and I adore Andy Stanley. He's been, I mean, I don't know him. It's not like we've hung out, but, like, he's spoken to my life through all of his writing. But I also think that some of the larger churches like North Point, that have such a massive media platform and have, like, a really famous pastor, they could probably weather this better through the end of the year, maybe even into the summer. But for the vast majority of local churches, Andy Stanley's not their pastor. And so their pastor's saying, well, I have 100 people in this auditorium every week that I'm trying to love on. And they're losing that momentum and those rhythms. And so it feels like fear all the way around, which is bad, because perfect love drives out fear, by the way. So we got to, like, claim that, I think, here too.
Yeah, that's like the crazy, just kind of a catch-22 contradiction we're dealing with, all this. I'm sure y'all have all followed along with the stuff going on with John MacArthur and his church. Have y'all kind of seen what's going on there in California?
Yep.
John MacArthur, big, well-known preacher, got some theology I have some questions about, but in general, he's a big church in California. In California, they've prohibited gatherings of 50 or more, including churches. And he's just meeting in kind of defiance of that, saying it's sort of like a persecution that his church needs to meet, and they're just doing it openly, packed in pews, no distancing, no masks, no anything. So I feel like that's one end of the spectrum. There have been some pastors who have done that, who have said, we're going to meet anyways. Jesus protects us from disease, and then give each other a hug. And then there's been breakouts. And then there's other places where they're really weighing in and out. I know we've all talked to a lot of different churches and done it different ways. My dad's church in Florida is a definitely an older congregation, and they've had to weigh the way to do it safely. And they've been very, very, like, they have pews blocked off where you have to, it's really far distance, and everyone wearing masks, and they're all the welcome time. No one's doing any of that. And they've done it pretty well. And I think what the hard part is, every congregation has just such unique situations they're dealing with, the age of their congregation. So that, like, the health, considering health, like Mike, you were saying, we have a lot of young families. So that's a huge factor in what we're having to decide. But then you have to consider the region you're in, the buildings you meet in. We have to worry about how much can we actually keep a sanitary area. And then we're adding on top of that, we're worrying about just about caring for, like Scott said, we want people to build those rhythms in their life. And it's a mental health and it's a spiritual health issue also, not meeting, as opposed to the physical health things. And so all that to say, we understand there's a lot going into it, and we're weighing and praying on this constantly, and we want to be together, and we want to build these rhythms, and we want to be safe, and we want to do it all. And we're trying to use wisdom from people around us to make those decisions as best we can. And it's hard, but I think we'll get somewhere that's good soon. Hopefully, we'll figure that out, and we'll do it together. And some people will choose to stay home whenever that happens, and we'll do our best to have a good way for people to join us online. But we really long to be with people.
Yeah, I think it's one critical thing is one of the critical things to me is understanding when we talk about meeting again, regathering. Well, there's two things. One is ecclesiology here, right? So this is forcing everybody to the reality that the building that you've been going and worshiping in is not a church. I won't let my children say that. If they say they're going to church, I say, oh, no, we don't go to church. We are the church. And so I'm like, literally I cut them off because it's like, we have to have a mental reset on that, right? That's the building you've been in is not church. It might mean a lot to you. The building that Kyle's in means a lot to me right now. But it's not an idol for me, or it's not something that has more value to me than the Father. So that ecclesiology has been really huge. But the other thing I want to say is when we talk about reopening or regathering, however we say that, it's not going to look like it did. Like it is going to be like socially distanced, safe. It's going to be depleted. I mean, we've learned that most churches in Texas, or San Antonio at least, they're running 10 to 15% of their usual attendance. So like we as we move into that, we don't want anybody to have the mindset that like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to be safe. We're not going to, it's going to be all the things that we can do to make it safe, but also to make it in person. And it's going to feel really different. And I know that some people just anecdotally have showed up at their church when it opened on the first Sunday, and then they haven't been back since. So it was like, I don't know, catch me up when we're done with the pandemic, So anyway, but I think that's something to think like when we talk about going back, we don't want people to imagine like a packed room at Oak Meadow Elementary or our all parish worship at Incarnate Word with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people all over each other. It's going to look just significantly different.
Yeah, and just the handful of pastors that I get to just be in relationship with and chat with, they're all saying the same thing, which is like on reopening, one, they're saying, I don't know what to do, number one. And number two, I'm doing my best. Like I'm really trying to hear from people. I'm trying to have wisdom. And I think by and large from our community, like, I think that's what we're hearing from them is like, hey, we know this is hard on you guys. We trust you. We know this isn't easy. Like of all the pandemics we've been through together, right? Like we finally have it figured out. No, like we've never done this before. It's like Joshua crossing the river with the people of Israel. He literally says, we've not gone this way before. Right. So I would just say, as a transition here to our last point, like this idea of encouragement, I have felt, I know we all on this church chat could say this, that we've all felt very encouraged by people in our community, and that we're in a season right now where I think that ministry of encouragement, I personally believe that it should take the forefront right now in a collection of ministry opportunities and initiatives, but encouragement, man, it has to be like at the forefront. You think about teachers and staff going back to school, students, parents trying to figure out what the best option is for their kids. Like if anything, I think in this next season, the church has a great opportunity, and we're going to be talking about that this coming Sunday, but has a great opportunity to really live into this ministry of encouragement that we see in the early church and in somebody like a Jonathan to a David. So I'd love for guys just to share thoughts on, like what does it look like right now to be an encourager, because everybody needs it. Like we should assume everybody needs to be encouraged, especially right now. So yeah, what does it look like to be an encouragement to folks right now?
I think the beginning of that ministry of encouragement is humility. And it's something that, you've talked about before and will continue to talk about, but like, you have to humble yourself and be committed to saying kind things to other people. That's just a huge part of that it's like, I actually need to just, speak and walk in humility. And then I think, more practically speaking, it looks more like picking up the phone right now, and actually talking with people, and calling and saying things. I mean, text messages are fine, but they're a bit of like a throwaway kind of deal. And so I think a text message probably works better when you have a really strong relationship with somebody, like that you've known, like you're always talking to one another, and you just throw in a text real quick that's like, hey, praying for you today. If it's not somebody you've spoken to in weeks or months, I think, just picking up a phone and calling somebody, would be really good. Sharing scripture. I had a really wonderful email sent to me. Do you guys do this when you start talking about the pandemic and then you think about the month something happened to you and you instantly get like totally anxious and depressed about, because I'm like, oh, in April, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this was an April thing. And
all the time.
I'm like, I'm dying. What is going on here? Anyway, in April, amidst the pandemic, 40 years ago, when this was still happening, I got a long email from somebody who had, felt like the Lord had really spoken to her about some things, and sent me this really long email that was kind of like, it was like a chapter of the Bible. And then throughout the chapter of the Bible, she like wrote in these specific prayers for me based on what she was reading. And I just was really amazed by how thoughtful that was. And really, came to me at a time that, I really needed that. And I thought it was a beautiful measure, to kind of like think about like the small things that you can do, but maybe commit to something big every week, like something kind of extravagant that you're going to really focus on one person, and reach out to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny you said humility, because I kept thinking about bearing with one another. And Ephesians 4, Paul says, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of spirit through the bond of peace. And I kept thinking about, that really encouraging one another is bearing with each other, not just like with our words, but also, there's people going through a really hard time right now. And, some of us are, and I think just the priestly call that we all have as believers to bear with one another in love. And to me, I've had several conversations with people who are mourning loss in one way or another, or who are angry, or just different things like that. And they're like, I'm sorry I'm burdening you with this. And in a strange way, it's super encouraging, just bearing those burdens with other people and not being afraid to ask for help, not being afraid to ask for prayer. And, I think more often than not, those people who are fielding those requests are actually encouraged to be like, man, I'm glad I have something specific to pray about for you, as well as, yeah, I'm in the same place. And there's a certain encouragement that comes with this humble transparency, and the opportunity for us to speak encouragement, to speak truth, to speak hope, in a loving way that really brings life, as opposed to us trying to handle that on our own. And I think that's something I've heard, both Chris and Scott, you guys just talk about, is this communal idea, this idea that we are actually doing it together. And that's where encouragement is found. It's not in handling it on your own, which I feel like is a huge temptation for me right now, is I'm assuming is for a lot of people, just to handle what we're going through on our own and just push through and bear through things on our own, where it says truly the goal is to bear with one another. That's where we find encouragement.
Yeah, I was going to say real quick, then we'll go, like, you guys chime in, but something occurred to me. so Monday night, my truck was stolen from my driveway, which is, it turns out it's not a big deal. I mean, it's strange, but we have insurance and, we're car shopping and all kinds of stuff. So we're good. I mean, everything's fine. But what happened after I posted something on Facebook about it was just this like shower of like phone calls and text messages of people reaching out. And I thought, man, that's such an interesting thing. Like I kind of posted on Facebook as like a joke, because it was like, okay, so now this is happening in the midst of all this other stuff. But really we weren't affected too deeply by it. But still people having that willingness to see somebody that's going through a challenging time and to make a personal reach to talk to them. And you know what? I got to say, like, I think a lot of people think that church leaders are a lot more squared away than they are. That like they don't need somebody to call them. They don't need somebody to reach out to them. I think that they think church leaders are squared away. And I can promise you, I've been leading church leaders for a long time. They are not squared away. They are a big hot mess of emotion and anxiety, especially in this season. So everybody needs encouragement right now.
Yeah, Scott, I love that example just from your own kind of personal journey this past week. And, Mike, you talk about the bearing with each other. There's a word that we throw out there a lot, and it's this like incarnational ministry, and it's like incarnational means joining with and like embodying the themes and the practices of the gospel of what Jesus did. And so when we reach out to a friend who's had their truck stolen, or when we make that phone call, when we, go watch somebody's kids because they're absolutely like at their end, we are participating in incarnational ministry with Jesus. He moved into the neighborhood. He put on flesh, like he showed up. And so encouragement, this ministry of encouragement, it truly is. It's showing up on behalf of somebody else. And I just love the examples that you guys are sharing. So when we think about, well, gosh, incarnational, what is that? Like, I think we're seeing it, and I think we have a great opportunity to see a lot more of it. So.
Yeah, I was going to say it is interesting, Chris, because that incarnational, it means embodied and physically present, which is also this weird kind of space we're in right now where we are able to be that for someone in a way, but also we can't. We're apart from one another. I'm reminded, of course, of Paul's writing letters from all over the place to other churches. And this is all as a result of him, not being able to be with them. And if you read these, there's a lot of instruction on doctrine and ways to deal with stuff. But depending on the letter, one of my favorites being Philippians. I mean, Philippians just starts off with over and over this encouragement of people, speaking of his affection for them and his prayers for them. I think that's like Paul sets a perfect model for when we're away from one another, how to encourage one another. So maybe there is a sense that we read something like a letter of Paul to a church, think, how is he encouraging people in this, and how can I do that for other people? There's this longing to be with one another, and he speaks of constantly. He speaks about how much he prays for them constantly. There's this thing about prayer. If you're like at a place and you say, or you're at church and someone says, "Oh, I'm going to have a job interview this week. Would you pray for me?" And you're like, yeah, I'll pray for you. I promise I'll pray for you. And then you go throughout the week and maybe you forget, which is not that's a fault we all have, I think, is that we kind of move on from that. First, if you're with that person, we always say, just go ahead and pray for them right now. Can I pray for you right now? But I also think that as we're apart from one another, that could be a perfect act to tell someone to pray for someone and then send them a message, say, I'm currently right now praying this for you. Or calling them and say, can I pray for you? I hear you have something going on. I would love to pray for you over that. Those simple acts, I think, speak to how much we're concerned and caring for one another. And especially when those rhythms have been disrupted, those rhythms where we could pray for someone in person, or we could have that conversation that would bring up what's going on. I think there's probably a lot of people that are having problems or struggles right now that we have no idea, because we're not bumping into them at church or at the grocery store, wherever we might normally have seen them. And so we have to work harder to connect with those people, to actually get the conversation going, to know what we need to be encouraging them in. There's things that we may not know, but that's also where we need to be in tune with the Spirit. If we're really and truly praying for people, asking for the Spirit to reveal to us what's going on, I believe we'll actually see some things happening. Will be that the Spirit will prompt you to call someone because they need that. And maybe on your own, you would have never seen that. But if we actually truly asked, Holy Spirit, will you reveal to me who I need to be praying for and who I need to contact? I believe that will happen. I believe God will put someone on your mind and you'll call them and you'll be surprised at what their needs were for encouragement, that you could be encouraging them in.
Yeah, that's, something something I want to say is this is not a little thing. This is not a little thing. This is not just like when you tell your kids to say something nice to somebody else. We are talking about a manifestation of maturity in Christ is what we're talking about. This is not little. It is huge. And I think that's something we pass by this all the time. That I'm fearful at times that we frame up Christian maturity around our capacity to analyze content, and we don't frame up our Christian maturity around the overflow of the fruit of the Spirit. So if you want to know what a Christian looks like, if you want to know what the inbreaking kingdom looks like, read the Beatitudes, read the Sermon on the Mount, and read Galatians chapter 5, right? The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, gentleness. That is the manifestation of the Holy Spirit sanctifying a person, is you see that in their lives. So when we talk about being humble and encouraging others, it's not a Hallmark card. It is the literal manifestation of the kingdom. I think it's the Scott McKnight quote that's on the board in our office that says, I'm going to mess it up now, but it's that something about the church is the sign of cosmic reconciliation. When we are reconciled to love our enemy, it is a sign of cosmic reconciliation. Sorry, Scott McKnight, I'm sure you're watching, and I'm sure I just killed that quote, but Dr. McKnight, I'm sorry, Dr. McKnight. Anyway, but the church is the embodied manifestation of cosmic reconciliation. That's it. The church is the embodied manifestation of cosmic reconciliation. And so that, the way we are living and speaking and saying things, it's the manifestation of the sanctification of the Spirit. And so as a pastor, my wife is a physician, right? So she has a differential diagnostic that she does whenever she sees a sick person. She runs through all these sets of questions as to whether they're healthy or sick. As a pastor, that's the same thing we do with people. We're gosh, they're just angry and cursing people. And they're we're doing a differential on them, saying I don't see joy. I don't see kindness. I don't see peace. I don't see patience. Not questioning their salvation, but definitely questioning their willingness to be sanctified. And are you growing in the Spirit, or are you not? And if you are, then encouragement is just an overflow of that. Sorry for the railing on that, but I think it's important.
That'll preach, man. That'll preach.
That's great. And so, Kyle, you want to share that about John, and we can kind of close up? I think that's great.
Yeah, our man John Wynn, he's been, you're a faithful one on this church chat. Thanks for joining in, John. Shout out. He just shared about how he's been getting up and with Eric Moot and another guy at the Oak Meadow Parish, and they've been praying for people together. And that's a way that first they catch up one another, but able to pray for others, which is, is an interesting thing. As I was saying about praying for other people, maybe that should be something you don't do on your own. We have Zoom rooms available. Here's my plug. Just like us four right here, it's a good format for you to join in with others and pray. We would love for you if you need some access to a Zoom room for prayer time, or you could just use a FaceTime or just a voice calling and praying with other people, or if you feel comfortable in a small bubble of people gathering together. That's a good practice all the time for sure, but this would be a good season, I think, for everyone to form that up. But I like that what John says, that's about you're gathering for prayer, not necessarily you could pray for yourself, but it's a prayer for encouragement for others. And I do think it's amazing, first, what God does in prayer for others, but also what he will do in you when you begin to have that posture towards other people. Like that's a practice that will begin to form more and more of the fruits of the Spirit in you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay. Any closing thoughts? All right. Well, thanks for chiming in, and just consider how you can put that into action today with your schools, with your friends. What does it look like to just lean into that and let the Holy Spirit work through you in somebody else's life? And we'll be back next Thursday. We're still trying to figure out next Thursday, but I think we're going to be talking about spiritual warfare. And we're going to be talking about whatever the heck was going on in Saul's life with the Spirit of the Lord departing. And should be really interesting. Heavily influenced by a professor that several of us are sitting under right now, Greg Boyd. So check it out next week. We're going to talk a little bit about what, Mike?
President Chris is leading that. He always gets
yeah, that's right.
The topics no one else wants to talk about.
Exactly.
This was exciting. I'm ready for this one.
Yeah, should be fun. Okay, well, we'll see you guys